Yes, of course. So Chair Collins.
Present. Let me do I should do my little preamble. It's like, good morning and welcome to the meeting of this Palo Alto City School Liaison Committee. Today is Thursday, December 17th, and the time is 8:31 a.m. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Chair. Yes, of course.
Jennifer is in the attendees. Maybe she didn't get the link to come to the panels.
Can somebody promote her? Thank you,
Yes.
Councilmember Koo. Let's see if we can promote her.
And we're working on it right now.
Before we call the roll and mark her absent. It'll go on, as we say in the schools, it'll go on your permanent record.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
I was in there being like, I'm here, I'm here.
I assume you heard Councilmember Koo was the one who noticed you. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Koo.
All right, so now we can complete calling the roll. I'm present.
Yes, Chair Collins is present. Board Member DiBrienza.
Present.
Councilmember Koo.
Present.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Here.
4 present.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is, I guess we don't usually approve agenda order. I'd like to propose a change to the agenda. The Project Safety Net team has a 9:30 hard stop. So we'd like to move item number 6, Project Safety Net update, to after item 2, which is approval of the November 19th minutes. And before you all joined, we checked in with staff and they seem to find that acceptable. So unless I hear an objection, that will be the new agenda order with item 6 now after item 2. Thumbs up from Ms. DiBrienza. No objections from others. Okay, so we're good with that. So the first item of business is oral communications. Any members of the community who wish to address the committee on non-agendized items can do so at this time. And you can do so by raising your hand in Zoom, either by pressing the raise hand. I used to have an icon, now it just says raise hand for me. So either press the icon or where it says raise hand. Or if you're dialed in by phone, you can press *9 on your phone and raise your hand that way. And we'll wait a beat to see if there are any. I do see an item of public comment. So could the clerk call the public comment?
Yes, of course. So far we have 1 raised hand. Dialing in.
And we're going to do 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
All right, and you'll have 2 minutes on the timer. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Pat Bird. I just want to note that the link to the Zoom meeting on the agenda does not seem to be working. So I don't know if that can be rectified. I was able to call in by phone. Thanks.
Thank you for letting us know. Well, I'll let our team know and we'll work on it right now.
That's how I ended up in participants, just so you know. I clicked on that and it asked for the code and it put me into, it was struggling. It wanted more information and then it put me into the webinar.
Okay.
Great.
All righty.
All right, sorry about that to any audience members who struggled to get in, and even more sorry for audience members who wanted to come and failed. And I'm sure the clerk will watch for any incoming communications that might be people looking for the link. Okay, so I think that's it. Sorry, I'm not set up. I don't see the chat very well. Okay, so that's the only public comment that we have for this morning, right?
Yes, I see no other public comment or raised hands.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move to item 2, which is approval of the November 19th, 2020 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Cruz, seconded by Board Trustee DiBrienza. I think in these meetings we have the clerk calls the roll, right? That's right.
Okay,
Or calls
sure.
the vote.
Yes, Chair Collins.
Hang on 1 second. I see a raised hand, and maybe it's public comment for this item. Shall we take it now and just make sure?
Yes, I can help with that.
Thank you.
So Miss Eileen Altman, I will allow you to speak. You will have 2 minutes on the timer.
And Ms. Altman, if you're speaking to the agenda item, which is the November 19 minutes, that's fine. If you're also speaking on public comment, and you didn't make it in time because of problems with the link, also fine. But if you want to speak to an agendized item, I'll ask you to wait for that agendized item. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm supposed to be one of the presenters and I didn't get a presenter link, and I just don't know how else to communicate. So I'm sorry to interrupt the meeting with this
Excellent.
need.
Well done. All right.
Perfect, really.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. So somebody will send her get her an appropriate link.
Looks like she's here. She's been
Been
upgraded.
promoted. Okay, Zoom. Okay. So now I guess we can take the vote on the meeting minutes.
Yes, apologies. Chair Collins,
Aye.
Board Member DiBrienza,
Aye.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yes.
This passed unanimously.
Excellent. Okay, so now per our earlier discussion, we'll move to item 6, Project Safety Net update. Who's got this one?
I believe that I am the one who's going to begin to speak to this. My name is Reverend Eileen Altman. I am one of the pastors at First Congregational Church of Palo Alto, and I'm also the chairperson of the board of directors of the new nonprofit Project Safety Net. We became a separate nonprofit this summer. We used to be a city program, so we're not really that new. We're actually a 10-year-old program, but we have a new form. I am excited to serve as our first board chair. My career has been devoted to health promotion. My first career was as a clinical community psychologist, and part of that work was to support and teach classroom teachers in teaching their students social and emotional learning processes. And so this work that I'm doing as Project Safety Net really brings together the ministry that I've been doing in Palo Alto for the last 13 years, in which I have been supporting children, youth, and families in my own congregation to have a healthier and more fulfilling life, but also the work that I used to do in a secular setting as well. I am joined today by our CEO, Mary Gloner. You're going to hear from her in a little while. You'll also hear from our vice chair, Meghna Singh, and from another board member, Dr. Shashank Joshi. They'll have a chance to introduce themselves later. Also in the call today are board members, Rob George, who is our treasurer, Nor Navade, who is our secretary. Peter Stone is on our board, and then serving in an ex officio capacity is Kristen O'Kane, who also is part of the city staff. And you'll see here all of our board members listed. One of the things that we're really excited about is that we have 2 of our board members are young adults. They're transitional age youth, and they really, both of whom grew up and went to our Palo Alto Unified School District schools, and they are able to speak to their experiences and also the great things that they're learning as young adults. They bring that to our board, and we're really pleased about that. Please hold your questions until the end of our presentation, because we're going to throw a lot of information at you today, but it will help you to know more about what we're up to now. And I'd like to turn it over to our CEO, Mary Gloner.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Altman, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to present today. My focus is to briefly share the history, then I will close highlighting operational milestones from the past 6 months. Project Safety Net started as a task force. It evolved into a community coalition, then eventually a mission to mobilize community support and resources for youth suicide prevention and mental wellness has not wavered. This is especially true as we are currently confronted by the two most challenging societal issues, the pandemic and racial inequality. During this time, PSN has dedicated itself to support and connect partners as they pivot to continue their service and remain viable, to advance and promote youth well-being and mental health resources, to participate in regional pandemic response efforts by nonprofits dedicated to emotional support and spiritual care. And just this week, joining Palo Alto's COVID-19 Community Ambassador Program. Thanks to the wisdom of community leadership, including the Palo Alto Unified School District and the City of Palo Alto, along with the persuasion of Youth Community Services and Leif Erikson, PSN adopted the Collective Impact Framework 5 years ago. Not long after that, I was hired by the coalition to translate this framework into practice as one of my tasks. While I was a seasoned community organizer, having the heart of a community mobilizer and the brain for health policy, the Collective Impact Framework was new to me. I immediately learned that collective impact made community organizing, social change, social justice accessible to communities accustomed to theoretical frameworks, design theories, and logic models, such as Palo Alto. Collective impact is commonly misunderstood as the act of partners, leaders, and community members coming together to implement an intervention, to lead an education event, or develop content for a survey, report, or plan. It's not as simple as that. As in the opening quote, collective impact brings people together in a structured way to achieve social change. Collective impact takes us from common goals to uncommon results. So it's a movement that is dedicated to systems and policy change involving these principles of practice. And especially want to highlight the following 4 principles that differentiates a collective impact versus a collaborative or a partnership. The first is design and implement the initiative with a priority placed on equity. This principle reinforces equity over privilege. The second, include community members in the collaborative. This principle reinforces empowerment versus charity, where collective effort prioritizes and starts with the community, the members that we are coming together to serve. So in the case of Project Safety Net, the priority community is not the partners, the backbone staff, the PSN leadership, or even the founding coalition members. The priority community is the youth who live, who study, worship, and work locally. Third, recruit and co-create with cross-sector partners. This principle is about shared power, especially by those who are not typically invited to, made space for, or felt welcome to participate, versus decisions by a few. And finally, build a culture that fosters relationships, trust, and respect across participants, not a culture of politics. These are Project Safety Net's principles. I'm proud that we've practiced some very well and actually serve as a model for other collaborations. While others, I have hope and believe we can do better. And to learn more about collective impact, to access tools, and to connect with a global network of collective impact practitioners, you can go to www.collectiveimpactforum.org. Based on the collective impact framework, these are this year's priorities identified pre-pandemic by partnership leadership, guided by the committee and adopted by the board. Those 4 are to be a convener and collaborator, education, training and outreach, policy and advocacy, especially in youth mental health and suicide prevention, and evaluation and shared measurement. Agencies, especially nonprofits, are as effective in their mission work based on the strength of their operations and infrastructure. However, these past 6 months have illuminated, especially for those of us who are mission-oriented, that we take these business foundations for granted. These are accomplishments from the last 6 months after separating from the city of Palo Alto. We secured our 501c3 IRS tax exemption status 3 months earlier than we expected. Great way to end 2020 and start the holiday new year. And in finances, the board approved a startup budget of over $281,000. Banking, financial services team, and payroll are in place. As for operations, as CEO, I formally entered into contract and drew a salary starting in mid-October. And our program coordinator paying started last week. Our HR, liability insurance, employee benefits in place, and we've developed a 9-month scope of work. In regards to resource development, the city of Palo Alto, we are so grateful for their continued commitment to Project Safety Net's mission by investing $100,000 annually for the next 5 years. We're leveraging the city's investment to not only secure an additional $160,000 this first year for short-term activities, but to also establish long-term relationships with other funding partners committed to serving youth in North Santa Clara County as well as South San Mateo County. The first year of funding prospects include over half from government, which includes local municipalities, county, state, and federal, especially funding that looks at the intersection of youth well-being and mental health with pandemic and racial equity. A third from community foundations. These are foundations who have had previous relationships with Project Safety Net while we were housed in the city, and our 501c3 status has opened a channel for PSN to secure funding for our priority initiatives. Over 10% will be from corporate or community benefit funds, such as Kaiser Permanente, and less than 1% from family foundations, individuals who previously donated to PSN. I'm working with the board to develop a robust individual donor campaign to launch in fiscal year 2021 and 22. We're committed to developing a plan that does not cannibalize donors that already invest in our partners. Later in the Q&A or after today's meeting, I'll be available to address any questions, share ideas, and identify ways to better collaborate. Now, our board vice chair, Meghna Singh, will give you a snapshot of PSN community engagement efforts, where you will learn of PSN's mission in action. Thank you.
Hey, can I pause you just 1 second before you begin?
Sure.
This is this is Board Trustee Collins. City Clerk's office. I've got a couple people who are still trying to get into the meeting and not able to join. Could you send to me by email or by text a copy of the participant link for this meeting? I can't figure out a way to get it.
Yes, of course. And we're working on.
I will forward it to those people.
Great. And we're working on it right now on having the links updated on the agenda. So I'll send you those right now.
Thank you so much. Okay, please go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries at all. Thank you, Mary, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Meghna Singh, and I'm the Vice Chair of Project Safety Net's Board of Directors. I'm currently a sophomore at the University of Michigan and am a PAUSD alum. I attended Fletcher and graduated from Gunn High School in 2019. Before I talk about a central pillar of Project Safety Net, which is community engagement, I wanted to share a little bit about why I personally am invested in mental health promotion and suicide prevention. In November of 2014, my family and the greater community were rocked to our core. My brother's best friend died by suicide. He was 16 years old and a part of the second suicide cluster that occurred in our community. I know I'm not the first to say that it was absolutely heartbreaking. Every death by suicide was and still is, and as a 14-year-old, it was also eye-opening. Students were struggling. My brother's friends were struggling, my classmates were struggling, and I knew that something needed to change. I made a promise to myself that year that I would do whatever I could to support our community so that we wouldn't lose another youth to suicide. As a way to grieve, I began educating myself about suicide prevention and found out that every single person has a role in the fight to prevent suicide. I learned about mental health and worked to ignite conversations amongst various stakeholders like students, teachers, parents, and community members. This work was really hard. Progress did not happen overnight by any means. I received pushback from parents who didn't believe in mental health, teachers who didn't want to give extension deadlines when students had a mental health concern and couldn't complete an assignment, and even roadblocks in my path from my own peers in student government who felt that at the time, mental health resources weren't deserving of funds. But I, along with other advocates in our community, didn't give up. We knew how important this work was then and how important it still is today. And in 2016, I was first connected with Project Safety Net's now CEO, Mary Gloner, and began attending community meetings each month. I saw firsthand the incredible support systems that exist for our youth in our community and wanted to help build this net of support to protect our students. And over time, progress was made. Wellness centers were developed at Gunn and Palo, full-time mental health counselors were hired, wellness resources were promoted, and so much more. And I hope to see this work continue now more than ever. And for the past 10 years, Project Safety Net has worked to mobilize community support and resources for youth suicide prevention and mental health promotion. And I'm honored to be here with you today to share just a few examples of the diverse community engagement efforts that Project Safety Net has participated in the last 6 months alone. In terms of policy advocacy, we have signed the proposal to the County Behavioral Health Department to secure the Mental Health Services Act in hopes of launching a community-based mobile crisis team and address mental health trauma in diverse communities. And now we've also partnered with the Behavioral Health Contractors Association and the County of Santa Clara Behavioral Health to facilitate a community conversation, which is actually being held today, to shape a countywide community mobile response program. In terms of education, September's Suicide Prevention Month is one of our most important months. And so this year we promoted and elevated our partners' efforts. So for example, the Santa Clara County QPR trainings that were held free of cost, as well as a film named Angst that was screened and discussions were held in various languages in order to reach different community members. For community outreach, a suicide postvention response occurred in July 2020, where a community PSN postvention protocol was followed, which engages partners and families, shares resources, and really tries to promote safe, consistent, and unified messaging, not only from our own organization, but from all stakeholders in our community. And now we know that connecting with youth is such an essential part of Project Safety Net's mission, especially during the pandemic. We want to make sure that we're up to date with students' needs and work with them, like Mary mentioned, to form a strong community support system. And especially during the pandemic, this is extremely important. And so in June 2020, Project Safety Net worked with a committee of youth to develop a youth convening for those ages 12 to 25 to learn about mental health in a COVID-19 environment, sources of support, and self-care tips. Additionally, in October 2020, Project Safety Net discussed mental health and wellness with Palo Alto and Gunn High School students during PAUSD's Wellness Week and identified opportunities for youth advocacy and suicide prevention with YCS Youth Connectedness Initiative leaders. And now that I've touched upon a few community engagements that PSN has participated in, I wanted to share some recent statistics about mental health in the United States and in our community to help put this topic into perspective. As you may know, between 2009 and 2014, 2 suicide clusters occurred in Palo Alto. And I know many of us are personally connected and invested in supporting youth mental health and well-being for this reason. 1 in 6 adolescents in the United States, age 6 to 17, experience a mental health disorder each year. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death among those ages 10 to 34 in the United States. After a 3-year decline in suicide rate from 2014 to 2017, Santa Clara County suicide rates increased in 2018 to 2019, and that's something that's to keep watch of. And now during the pandemic, 1 in 4 young adults ages 18 to 24 have seriously considered suicide in the past 30 days prior to completing the survey. And now more than ever, the pandemic has caused increased rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and suicidality, which illustrates how critical it is to have collaborative community support for our students, which can be built off of partnerships. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Shashank Joshi to introduce himself and talk about continued and new partnership opportunities between Project Safety Net, PAUSD, and the City of Palo Alto.
Thank you, Meghna. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, members of City Council. My name is Shashank Joshi. I'm a parent in the community. My wife, Mala, and I have raised 3 boys in Palo Alto Unified School District. We've been living in this community for almost 15 years, and we have really been proud of being part of this coalition that has been built for many years, but in particular after 2009-10, when the community came together and really became an example across the state of California of what happens when one can turn one's grief into positive action. And it's kind of a theme right now in the pandemic where we've had to find silver linings everywhere. But there were such important contributions from people like the Ojakians and like Kathleen Blanchard and other people who lost loved ones in the early days of that particular cluster. But I'll remind our community that 2009-10 was not the first experience that we had with death by suicide. In fact, between 2000 and 2008, we lost several young people in the community, but because they were not at the train tracks, because they were not public deaths, several of these young people died at home. It was not covered in the paper. And so this is not a new topic for us, but in 2009-10, we really were galvanized. And so what we've learned and what I'm going to highlight here are some opportunities going forward for partnership, beginning with how the school district and the city came together. Because as Meghna said, not only in 2014, but in 2009-10, these were public deaths. So there was a lot of scrutiny. There was a lot of, what will Palo Alto do? So people came together to form Project Safety Net. And this was first begun as a task force, and Carol Zepecki and Rob DeGose, Carol Zepecki, who at the time was director of special ed at the district, Kevin Skelly, who was a superintendent, and Rob DeGose and several others at the city came together and said we needed to bring the community together and we need to develop a comprehensive community-based plan, not only for suicide prevention, but also for the promotion of well-being. As we've learned in particular from the early work, one must conduct suicide prevention and well-being promotion together. Whenever you have a tragedy, whenever there's postvention, you are engaging in prevention. Education is happening all the time. Conversations need to be happening all the time. Talking about suicide does not increase the risk. In fact, there's a lot of science to show that if suicide and risk for distress and severe distress and desperation can be talked about in ways that promote help seeking, there is a proper way to message, but an important lesson from the first cluster was not talking about it, especially as the adults and as the young people involved are apt to do on social media, but certainly with each other. We have to be helping to engage conversation, promote help seeking, highlight resources. And so the city schools task force at the time contributed to this convening document, which has come to be known as the K-12 Toolkit for Mental Health Promotion and Suicide Prevention. This toolkit lives on the web. It's in its third edition now. It's become a best practice that the California Department of Education highlights as part of its model suicide prevention policy. And the work really started here in Palo Alto and in Los Gatos as well, in a community that also experienced several tragedies at that time. So the legacy of that early work is part of why we're here today. There was financial and in-kind support, not only direct dollars, but also personnel contributions, partner sponsorships, and meeting space that was provided by the city. With regard to these three particular areas, as we think about prevention, intervention, and postvention as it relates to suicide, a big part of what the city and the school does together is to advance education. When we and a number of others around the state helped to put together what would later be known as the Pupil Suicide Prevention Policy, which later became signed into law, AB 2246 for grades 7 through 12, AB 1767 for grades K through 6. It mandated that every district in the 58 counties, every LEA needed to put together a pupil suicide prevention policy that not only teaches about what is normal stress and how do we deal with it in our everyday lives, and how can stress actually help us if in small quantities, and when does it get to be distress, and when does it get to be desperation. That all needs to be taught in developmentally appropriate language, starting in kindergarten, with social emotional learning strategies and going through 11th and 12th grade. We also need to equip and empower our teachers and school staff with how to have these conversations. So all of that started through the City Schools partnership. And when there is a tragedy, and although we've not had clusters since 2015, we have had loss in this community. We have lost people to suicide, either directly or indirectly. It may not have been students, it may have been a community member or a teacher or someone connected to the school. We have created through Mary's leadership and others in the City School Coalition, coordination of community-centered protocols. What happens after there's a tragedy? And again, this toolkit was a convening document of a number of people in the community. I'll mention CARA as a very important organization that was involved in the first edition. And in fact, the CARA forums that were used with how to have these conversations, what kinds of messaging can go out from the superintendent, et cetera. That was all part of that early work. And then finally, in the next 6 months, what we look forward to is having the school board and city council representatives attending PSN meetings, joining coalition activities, and volunteering in community work groups, in addition to collaborating, informing, and participating in several of these more high profile activities. Meghna mentioned Suicide Prevention Month in September. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's another really important time for us to be promoting the kinds of things that connect us to one another as we prepare for the school year to come to a landing. Our hope is that, maybe there will be spring sports, maybe there will be more opportunities for connection. These are the kinds of well-being activities we take for granted until you have a pandemic. And although we've not had to deal with suicide clusters, we do know that young people are still going through a very hard time. And people like to say, we hope these suicides are in our rearview mirror. We know that objects in the rearview mirror are closer than they may appear. This is the reason why we need not only upstream in terms of education and empowering our teachers and staff and parents with how to recognize signs of depression, anxiety, and severe distress, but also downstream with the important work of the XCAP, the important work of looking at grade separation, all of these things around the train as a very specific means restriction target have continued to be important and will be important as we go forward. So I'll stop now and transition over to Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So now we turn it over to the committee for your questions and answers. And we have board members here who are also not presenting, but will be available to also respond if necessary.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Members of the committee, if you want to raise your hands, I'll try to get it. Maybe we could take the slides down and then we can have there we go. Now I've got a bigger picture here. So if you want to raise your hand either in Zoom or on the screen, we can take questions for our guests. I'm looking. I see Ms. DeBrienza. Go ahead, Ms. DeBrienza.
Hi, thanks. I don't actually have a question. I just want to thank you all for your work, congratulate you on getting to this stage. And I know that, when we've had those past suicide clusters, my kids were very young and I didn't have any kids of the age where, it was traumatic, but to have little squirts at home was different. And so knowing that you've been here these years and continuing to develop the relationships and the work and the toolkits, I'm really grateful for all you guys do.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka.
I'd also like to thank you guys for your work and congrats to getting to where you guys are. It's a huge step forward. I do have a question though, which is, so we've been talking about another project, the Palo Alto Museum. And one of the proposals was that I think there was some money that had previously been used for Project Safety Net. And there was discussion about whether Project Safety Net would actually need that money or not. That was previously used from the budget, or whether it should be used for the Palo Alto History Museum. And I don't know if anyone can say whether it's needed or not, or whether those funds that have been previously used for this project or for this program can be reallocated to something else.
I believe that's a question for Kristen or Monique.
Sure. Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. I mean, that would be up to, I think, the council to make that decision how they would want to use those funds.
Well, I know I agree with that, but it's more like, is there need from Project Safety Net, or has Project Safety Net achieved financial, independence, and thus no longer needs money from the city? That's kind of like the more fundamental question.
Go ahead, Mr. George.
Councilmember Tanaka, thanks for the question. As the treasurer of Project Safety Net, I will say there is a need. If you take a look at the sort of budget numbers that were presented, we approved a budget of $284,000 for this year, which means that the city has graciously given us our $100,000. We had some donations that came over with our 501c3 status, but we are still fundraising the remaining $160,000 for this year, as we've spent most of the last 6 months getting our operational foundation in place, including finances.
Okay, so it sounds like if at least some of that money that was previously allocated for Project Safety was redirected, it could potentially hurt this program then.
I can also add, for context or for comparison, when we were a City of Palo Alto initiative, our operating budget was about $270,000 plus.
Yeah.
I know there was some other funds that were directed from other sources. So we're definitely doubling your investment.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important program and want to support it. I just want to, there were just some people that indicated that this money could be moved from this to something else, like the History Museum. I just wasn't sure if that was true or not. So I wanted to check with you guys to see, how you guys are doing, and whether you guys are kind of like off on your own now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Good move. If anybody ever asks you, do you want to give us money back? The answer should always be no. So good job with that. My question is why? I didn't follow the process by which you became a 501c3 after years of being kind of I guess a sub agency or a project run under the city's umbrella. And I guess I'm curious why you did that. I mean, I guess I see some fundraising opportunity because now the donations, I assume, are outside donations are tax deductible, or maybe people are eligible to give them. But what was the impetus to move from being under the city's wing to being a separate entity?
I'll be happy to address that question. So before I joined, that was a decision made jointly with the school district, the city of Palo Alto, especially from the community partners. When the second cluster of suicides occurred, and as Dr. Shashank Joshi said, that even though the suicides were quite visible and those were the focus, it was an issue of concern and priority for the community because they were happening. So the community wanted to invest in this work to be more of a long-term, to really address and go deeper. So other than just a nonprofit, it's also to be to really advocate and to shape policies. And as a city government and entity, we're restricted from doing that and mobilizing and organizing. Then thirdly, many of our partners, while Palo Alto is one of their priority communities, they serve youth outside of Palo Alto. and they wanted to have that flexibility and opportunity to do more regional. So, and then just sustainability, and to be able to have a board that oversees governance, all the traditional things that makes an effective nonprofit. Not to take away from the city council and the school districts with a lot of heart, but my hiring was actually the first time they had 100% individual dedicated to the initiative, who weren't stretched to do other things because to respond to the community. So I hope that helps.
It does, though. I have a question. Your statement raises another question. You mentioned the school district involvement. As far as I can tell, the school district isn't on your board, doesn't fund you. It doesn't look, looking from the outside in as a board member, it didn't look like the school district had any direct involvement with your organization. Is that an accurate perception?
I can say that they were involved, but there was opportunity to even get involved more. And it really depends on the leadership.
But just from a formal point of view, it doesn't look like when you say they is me. I mean, I'm on the school board, yeah. So it doesn't look like we are involved in any formal way, right?
I will share that your former trustee, Terry Godfrey, served on our executive advisory board. She was critical in helping us and prepare for our transition. Granted, she really was representing herself as a constituent, as a community leader. We also had other trustees who were involved and attended meetings. And I've, like Jennifer DeBrienza and Heidi Emberling. But in regards to funding and investment, some of the student services and wellness team, mainly in kind, but it's sometimes sponsored, about $1,000 here or there for when we had community meetings, especially around the EPI-8 investigation and how to convene that with the community, but also bringing the partners together. But to the level of the city of Palo Alto, no. Engaging in a formal contract, no.
So a suggestion I'd make, I mean, and I haven't spent much time looking at your organization, and I mean, I'm aware of your activities and so on, but I hadn't really followed the process by which you became what you are today. It does seem to me odd and potentially amiss that the school district is not formally involved. And that it seems to be relying on kind of the goodwill of individuals acting in their individual capacity, whether the senior levels of the school district are engaged with what you do. And that might be something you want to think about. I mean, I noticed that the city has an ex officio seat on your board. You could do the same with the school district. There's nothing more likely to attract funding than putting somebody on your board. There also might be a formal funding relationship, though it's interesting because I think there are a number of things that have been done in the city over decades where at some point or other the school district had a formal funding relationship with, and now they don't. And I think if we're setting things up for sustainability to serve youth and the school district is not formally involved, there's something went wrong. It doesn't make sense to me. We are an agency dedicated to serving youth, and we serve 12,000 of them, but we're not involved with your agency, with your entity, in a formal way. And that just seems. Kristen, I mean, you've been with us for a while back in the city. Was there ever any formal involvement of the city under the old regime?
Well, the city's been involved with Project Safety.
I'm sorry, the schools under the old regime, right?
Yes, I believe so, and I think
the schools were very involved, Todd. And sorry to talk over you, Kristen, but I was reading your mind saying I think they were involved, and I'm saying yes, they were involved.
Well, yeah, I know we were involved, but it doesn't seem to have ever taken any formal.
They were on the leadership team and the steering council before we were a 501c3. There was always a school board or school district representative. They were
somehow that's fallen by the wayside. And
well, this might be a transition to talk about the Partners Council, which is kind of the next step. I think one challenge we had was around maybe in some ways, and Superintendent Austin is here, he may want to comment. we had the best of both worlds. We had school district input and buy-in, and yet when there were things that needed to be said that may have been raising questions or critical about school district decisions, we felt like we had to tread lightly. As a 501c3, we have a little more independence, and maybe we can, talk more about the Partners Council, which is a way of engaging critical stakeholders like the school district, like the school board, because we absolutely can't do this work without the school board and without school districts as partners. So there's this concept of the Partners Council that maybe Mary wants to spend a minute talking about, but I certainly, as a member of the board of directors, would be open to what you're proposing, Todd, which is more active engagement.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joshi. I don't want to hijack this meeting into discussion of all this stuff. It's probably a deeper topic and other people should be involved, but I just wanted to, I do think when you talk about sustainability and deep engagement with the community, if it isn't, if it doesn't involve the school district at a formal level, then I think you're missing a leg of your stool or a leg of your table. And it makes you more wobbly than you need to be. And I wouldn't want to depend on the goodwill of whoever's sitting in, the trustee chairs or the superintendent chair in the future. These things should be formalized and independent of individuals so that they sustain.
May I add something? I want to say thank you for raising that and for championing it. I believe that's one area that we really want to have parity and we really respect. And so maybe one of the priorities and goals for this year is how to shape that a more formal process, whether in the different levels of engagement, not only the Partners Council, which is more the group that is the tactical and the reaction and applying, but also more the visionary, the governance, and the systems impact that the board having an ex officio, and then also looking at how we can collaborate on investment so that we are maximizing on long-term suicide prevention and mental well-being. There are a lot of concept proposals about how we can go deeper in doing education, prevention, and postvention, and how to really bring the richness of our various partners to collaborate. And that's where Project Safety Net is one of the strengths, is to be that bridge builder and facilitator, especially, and then elevate the strengths and the momentum of the respective partners. So I don't know if we need to follow up with Superintendent Austin about how can we use this as a positive momentum about moving forward.
I'd start with him, and if he doesn't respond quick enough, quickly reach out to everybody else you can think of.
Okay, thank you.
That was funny.
Yeah, I do think, there's a multi-level relationship here. Sure. You guys need to have relationship with our wellness center and our director of student supports. And, there's an operational linkage here that maybe appropriately is on your partner council, but there's also kind of a governance and direction and role in the community relationship that I think is probably requires something more than that. So something to think about. I'd urge you to pursue Dr. Austin relentlessly, as well as anybody else who.
Yeah. And if I can just add, the director of student services was actually, for each rendition of the Project Safety Net leadership team, has always had a seat on the leadership team. So that has been the history. And I think with the transition to 501c3, we want to make sure and continue to have that kind of engagement.
Well, you should double make sure, because we just got a new one, right? So somebody ought to call on him before he gets all his time wrapped up.
We've already begun a really good partnership with Jason Krolikowski, and so we will make sure to continue to engage him and get his ideas, as well as from Dr. Austin.
Great. Councilmember Koo.
Todd, Chair Collins, thank you very much for bringing that, because that was something that I also noticed, and I was going to have to dance around it very delicately as I spoke, but you put it really well. So thank you for that. It's very exciting that you have transitioned to where you are, and all the work, from starting point. Mary, I still remember when you came on, it was a huge struggle, but you made it happen, and all your partnership with Dr. Josie and everybody else has been phenomenal. And to come to this point, and I think that was what the city had always intended, right? Was because of the cry out in the community, we needed to put the city, I wasn't on council at the time, had to put something together in order to address and to bring community voices together to address the suicide that was taking place in our community. So it was always intentional for it to proceed to where it is today. Am I right, Mary?
That is correct. And
Go ahead.
no, I'm just saying that is correct. And what I always appreciated is that we had the leadership of the school district and the city, but always listening to the community, their partners, the residents.
Right. Thank you. So I had a question on the principles of practice that you had showed on that slide. As you were going through it, I was a little bit concerned at that point because I didn't see anything in there that really mentions mental health. But as the presentation continued, then I started to feel a lot more less anxious. It talks a lot about, what you said about equality, definitely getting community members together to collaborate here in Palo Alto, as well as throughout the county, is important. Learning from each other across sectors. And then you said not to focus on politics. I think that's really important, especially with the younger age groups. That is a stress level. So how is that going to be delivered, or how do you see that working in terms of helping not to make it become about politics?
So I should, for those who don't know, I'm also a PAUSD alum many, many decades ago. So I really understand about the high capacity and about, I still care about being that good student and wanting to achieve and so forth. So this collective impact, just to step back, it's not a mental health model. It's a social issue, community organizing. So you can actually take this framework and, addressing poverty, homelessness, all the different social issues, and it's been utilized by county, state level, as well as local community organizing groups. And that's what I learned in the past 5 years. One of those, so the tenets of collective impact is how you build that trust and minimize politics, is that there's transparency. In other words, when having discussions and you go to a collaboration meeting, and sometimes it may not align with your own organization agenda or your personal principles, rather than having side conversations between one or two, you really foster or facilitate that discourse as a group, and whether it's done as a community level or, and there's different strategies, doing it with the partners or leadership steering committee, or even at the board level. So I think that's one of the innate challenges, and this is very like an idealistic framework, and some collective impact do this quite well, and some are struggling, and there are the ways. So I don't know if that answers that question.
No, it really helps, because I was really trying to kind of figure out how is that going to be delivered, and how is that going to be processed, and are the recipients going to be able to put it into the boxes and not get affected by it, to separate and understand and respect the other perspective. So it's a very difficult thing to do, even at my age, which I won't tell. But anyways, the other thing is, one of the things that I find, social media, especially now that we're kind of sheltered in place, is a really huge thing, right? Everything is through the internet. My son-in-law, who's 30 years old, has his phone and is constantly on it. And so, I've been kind of tracking Screen Agers, which is also a project out of Stanford. And is there, well, I don't know if you have collaborations with them right now, but I would hope that maybe that's something that you can reach out to, to engage with them and see whether or how that might have impacts on, socialization. I mean, now social is through the media, it's through social media, but what about face-to-face? Because more than ever, I find that face-to-face and human touches is really important. I think, Mary, you come from Guam, right?
My family's from the Philippines.
Oh, from the Philippines. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I lived on Guam. We're all very, very huggy, and that's the way we say hello and everything. So it's very hard now, when we are so separated. The other thing I wanted to mention is really I would hope that, and here are just suggestions, because what I find is there's also cultural backgrounds that has effect on mental health and suicide, right? So do you have ethnic group backgrounds where you can kind of have more lectures or help folks understand, or families understand, some of our long-held beliefs might have impacts on mental health. So that would be just another suggestion. Yeah, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
It's a rule that somebody has to talk while muted, so I've checked the box.
I just raised my hand there.
Just 1 second, Dr. Joshi. I just wanted to point out we're coming up on 9:30. We do need to have a few other agenda items, so let's do wrap up comments and then move on. Go ahead, Dr. Joshi.
Really quickly, I just wanted to respond to Lydia's comment, which is absolutely true. Screens are part of our lives, even more so now. There are a number of folks at Stanford that's where I work within our department, but in particular, a lot of the models, because Project Safety Net's focused on youth and young adults, but also a number of initiatives are going on looking at the impact of screens and media across the lifespan. In many ways, very positive influence, but obviously very problematic in other ways. And with regard to culture and cultural adaptation and cultural engagement, in fact, there are a number of initiatives funded through the Mental Health Services Act that have been going on through the County of Santa Clara, through the behavioral health folks there, Palo Alto University, and the Office of Suicide Prevention, through the leadership of folks like Megalian and Evelyn Quintanilla and other folks there. There have been a number of initiatives that have been really culturally adapted for the number of very diverse communities we have in the county. And some of us on this call here have been part of those, part of developing and delivering. And so even more than ever, I think the way this content gets delivered and the way that you engage diverse communities is even more important than ever, because you can have the best message, you can have the best evidence-based or evidence-supported program, but if it doesn't get received in the way you intend, it's really not going to be very effective. And so, being culturally responsive means something about the people in your community, the people in the room, the people who you need to engage. And then you may often need to engage cultural brokers to help and co-lead those programs to be able to not only deliver content, but importantly, to answer questions and to follow up and to have ongoing conversation. And so we always like to highlight that part of any talk we do. What can I do here as a parent? There's 200 in this auditorium, but there's several hundred more who are not here. How do I make a difference? So we just highlight, well, you can make a difference in your own social circle. Have a conversation about what you just learned today. Tell them something about what was interesting. Spread the word. Get the webinar, that Mary will send out, and send the link to a friend and have conversation. So it's ongoing, and culture is everywhere. I mean, every conversation has cultural components throughout our city, throughout our county.
Thank you. Any last comments before we move on?
Actually, may I? I'm sorry
please.
to take it a little bit. I just wanted to bring forward, I went to a panel at CHC at Stanford, and it was I have to say it was very eye-opening because the people that were on the panel, there were a couple that were suicide survivors. So they had attempted suicide, but for whatever reason, somebody saved them or they saved themselves. But for them to be able to talk about it afterwards and come out and share the desperateness that they felt, and then what happened after. And then when they did not go through with the action of suicide and survived it, what they realized in the next 6 months or in the years that came afterwards, and how they had healed from that. I thought that was so powerful. And when somebody loses their family or friend to suicide, a lot of times there's no talking about it. And that's the only way people, I think, will be able to understand that it's a huge loss, that they don't realize everybody around them, what they feel after they're gone by the action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you to our guests for that presentation. We were looking forward to getting it, and you guys delivered on our expectations. So thanks very much, and glad to hear about your new structure. And Dr. Austin, I assume your email is already clogged with board members from Project Safety Net, letting you know what the next step is. So thank you all.
All right.
Chair Collins, before we move on, I just want to see if public would like to comment on this agenda item.
Okay. If any member of the public would like to comment on this agenda item or some agenda item later on the agenda, just raise your hand in Zoom and we will call on you when we get to public comment. Not seeing any hands raised for this. I think we'll go back to our agenda. And if the PSN people want to drop off, that would be fine. And let me bring the agenda back up. Apologies. Well, I'll do it by memory. I think the next item, we're going back to superintendent and city manager comments. And why doesn't the city, since we're the guests, the city can lead off.
Well, thanks. I think we're partners, but at least that's how I operate.
Well, you physically host. That's what I mean.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks again for everyone's patience. If anyone is still listening on their phone, an updated link has been provided on the city schools page. So if you wanted to join Zoom, not on your phone, that is possible. Today, I wanted to highlight that there is a significant opening. Foothills Reserve is open today to all members of the public, and just wanted to highlight that begins today, December 17th. And I don't know if there was any other comment on that from Kristen, but if she doesn't, that's fine. But Kristen, did you have anything else you wanted to mention about Foothills?
I don't think so, other than, the city's been working closely with some partners on just ensuring that opening the park will continue to protect the natural resources there. And, we're looking at different ways to expand a little bit of nature programming there with some of our partners, just to provide the best experience that we can for our new visitors. And we're really looking forward to welcoming everyone to the park. So I guess that's it.
Thank you. I did want to highlight that as the Santa Clara County is in a far more restricted phase right now of related to coronavirus, that our free COVID-19 testing will continue through February, and that the test site will move to the El Palo Alto room at Mitchell Park starting January 8th. That will allow us to accommodate more people and a greater number of participants. Again, that happens twice a month. So the testing dates Coming up will be January 8th, January 22nd, February 5th, and February 26th. And you can make appointments up to 7 days in advance. And there are also, the county has also announced additional testing options. So if you are a subscriber to the coronavirus report, you receive those updates on a regular basis. And I would encourage anyone who's not a subscriber to sign up for that. So really great information available there as well, including ideas for how to engage yourself either in the community or to find ways to improve your wellness, both mental and physical, as we're a little bit more restricted on our movements. Because of these restrictions, we have reopened California and University Avenues to vehicular traffic. Restaurants are not able to have the outdoor dining areas, so that will be open for the time being. And I think that was it. We are going into the holiday period, and so the final thing that I would mention is City Hall is technically closed from December 24th through, we reopen January 4th. But certainly most people, if you email someone, you will get some sort of a response. We will be checking in. So hope that you all have a great holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, and thank you for the same back to you. Dr. Austin.
Chair Collins, can I add one thing? I'm so sorry.
Please. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, please.
No worries. Thank you. And thanks for all the updates, Monique. I just wanted to add the last one about the PG&E issue that Chair Collins brought up at the last meeting, that there's the easement question coming from PG&E. So we've been having conversations with your team offline, and we set up a meeting tomorrow with all of you as partners, and we wanted to just make sure that we could process through that a little bit more and understand better from the district your needs related to that. So I just wanted to flag that as a follow-up, that we are looking forward to further engaging in the conversation and having some guidance from you all on what we're going to do there.
Yeah, we appreciate your responding on that, and looking forward to the meeting.
Great. I look forward to seeing you there.
Dr. Austin.
Just a couple quick ones. Elena from the weekly asked me to give some thoughts about the year in review. That was wild. If as I was writing my response, I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't coming out of my own head onto the keyboard. Unbelievable. But some highlights. We are the only school district open for business in the entire county of Santa Clara. And I think that's a testament to our board and to our staff and to our parents. And the most telling thing that just happened, we allowed a transfer period for elementary schools to go either from hybrid into distance learning at the semester, or the other way, from distance to hybrid. And we have enough trust with our community now that we picked up a net gain of over 30 students back to hybrid from distance. So our number grew for families trusting us to serve their students. And I think that's really important. Lots of places all over the state of California are looking to Palo Alto daily to see what we're doing, and that's it's exciting. It's also a big responsibility, and we're showing people that you can open, you can stay open safely, and you can follow the rules. In fact, we have teachers who have told us they feel safer while at work than when they're out in other aspects of their life. There is no chance of people violating. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'd say there's no instances of people violating the rules while on our campus. And on the streets, that may or may not be true. So we have had some cases. We document our cases on our website. To date, there's been zero spread, meaning that nobody has picked it up after going through tracing on our campus, and there has not been student to student, student to adult, or adult to student transfer. So again, following the protocols precisely has been great for us. That does not mean that there won't be a spread at some point in time, and if there is, we'll continue to follow those protocols and shut down. But we're very happy with our ability to stay open, and we've charged our middle and high schools with getting more students back at their levels starting January 25th. Although opening in a hybrid looks unlikely given the restrictions put on us by the county. If you're not already open, it makes it very, very challenging to reopen in a full way while in the purple tier. So that is not a choice. That's actually a prohibition by the county. So that's all I have for my report.
Thank you. If there are no questions for the staff, then we can move to city and school board and city council meeting update. Mr. DeBrienza, I'll just go very briefly and add to it if you like. We've had just one meeting since our last meeting. We had a meeting this week on Tuesday that was filled with a lot of business activities. It was our organizational meeting. So as I mentioned just before the meeting started, I was quickly kicked to the curb as president, and the new president of the school board is Mr. Shanik Darab, who I'm sure many of you know, and the new vice president is Ken Dauber. And also in that meeting, we had an important goodbye. Deputy Superintendent Karen Hendricks, who I know has come to these meetings several times in the past, that was her last board meeting as she is leaving us to become the superintendent of, Dr. Austin, you have to help me, Alta Loma School District in Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California, where I have no doubt that she will be an outstanding superintendent. She was a truly outstanding contributor to our school district during the time that she was here, and we all thanked her. I'm trying to think if there's anything else material to city school affairs that we discussed at that meeting. Ms. DeBrienza, can you think of anything?
No.
No. I mean,
well, I guess one thing, because it came up in a lot of different things. We were talking about our chronic absenteeism, and talking about equity work, and talking about ways that we're making sure we're getting lunch to kids that need it and whatnot. So just equity, big picture. The district has really been focusing on that, and I have to hand it to Dr. Austin. Their leadership team meetings with their principals and administrators, they've been talking about anti-racism work and equity work, and where the low-lying fruit sort of lies to start. And we've have over 60 staff members regularly attending anti-racism opportunity, professional development opportunities, both within and outside the district. So I hope that just continues to grow, and we continue to do the work necessary to kind of just move the whole system. We have some disproportionality in special ed. We've got, it shows itself in kind of every area. And as we think systemically, I think it's all going to get better.
All right, thank you. Council members, any update from city council meetings? Sounds like it's been pretty quiet there.
So I'll just say a few words. You guys probably heard about the utility bills overcharge issue, maybe, or not really?
I did. I'm watching for my refund.
That's right. Yeah. So that's we talk about a closed session, so I can't talk about the details, but you publicly probably saw like, $12 million, right? So quite a bit of money, pretty, and the court rulings out there as well. So you can read about that yourself, but it's a lot of money, right? As you can imagine. So something that keep an eye on. We also passed a ordinance on firearm safety. So you guys, well, not really passed. We started looking at having enforcing or having more trying to keep firearm safety or keeping firearms safe at home. So you might have heard about that. Maybe that's good for make sure kids don't play with them. I think those are the key things. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Koo, anything to add? Looks like no. Okay.
Actually, I do have a question for you guys. I'm not sure this is the right topic, but I was reading there's a recent Post article, I think, that talked about how some kids with distance learning are not performing as well as they did before. Is the district tracking this at all?
Yeah, I'll just answer briefly. Dr. Austin, you can if you want. One report that we look at carefully is that we have looked at in the past carefully is what we call our DF report, which at the end of every quarter tracks the number of students who are on track to receive a D or an F in the class. And we review that against prior periods. And our DF report, which I think we saw in early November or maybe late October, was not materially different from what it had been the year prior, which we took as, and in fact, in some ways was slightly improved. And we were somewhat surprised to see, and I've since seen articles from all over the country about students, significant drops in student performance under distance learning. That doesn't seem to be the case with us. And if that's true, I attribute it, as always, to the incredible efforts of our staff and the incredible efforts of our families and students to keep things on track despite the adverse conditions. Dr. Austin, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, you sure did. It's a national issue getting a lot of attention. There were districts, even in our county, that had 300% and 400% increases in Ds and Fs. We did not. But the students who struggle the most during closures, and we still have work ahead. And we still think our best intervention is getting students back on campuses. So we are pushing for that.
Councilmember Koo.
Actually, I do have something to say, to bring up. At our very last meeting, the History Museum, Palo Alto History Museum, was on the agenda. And it's unfortunate, because it has been, through the years that I have been on, it has been more or less sabotaged with misinformation being given to the public. But more than that, the History Museum actually, when it comes to fruition, and if it should come to fruition, has a lot to offer to the community, especially where there is services, community services where the youth can participate in. And there is a program that the museum board of directors have put together where it can engage youth and engage the community itself. But more than that, history, as you know, is behind math, economics, biology, engineering, and so many other academic topics. So it also helps to develop in the fields of politics, social, cultural, and religious context. So, it is unfortunate that it has been put into a new direction going into for the History Museum, where it has been expanded to bring in private, to look at private organizations coming in and using the Roth building, which is a historical building by Birch Clark, where physicians, Esther Clark and many others, Dr. Lee, that was the start of the HMOs. So it is the building itself, it's very historical, and Birch Clark architecture is really beautiful. But it also has, to have the museum in there, it would be significant to carry on that historical aspect. So that was just one of the things that came about at our last meeting. And like I said, there is that component for community involvement, especially for the youth. And that could be something that we collaborated with Project Safety Net as well, for youth to help with archiving or whatever else a history museum offers. So I just wanted to add that piece of news to recent city council actions.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's nothing else on recent meeting updates. We can move to the next item.
Oh, and before, sorry to interrupt, Chair
Yep.
Collins, before we move on, would you like to open public comment for this agenda item?
Yeah, sure. I tend to expect that people will raise their hands if they want to, so I don't say it every time. But if anybody wants to comment on this item or a future item while we're talking about it, they can just raise their hand in Zoom using the raise hand function, or if they're dialed in, they can enter *9 on their phone and raise their hand that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I've got to figure out how to get the agenda back on my little phone here. Is the next item, oh, it's COVID-19 coordination, I remember now. Do we need to discuss anything related to this item? I think Dr. Austin saying no, city staff, anything to discuss? Okay, I think we continue at our similar level to past coordination. Councilmember Koo, did you have your physical
Yes.
hand raised there?
Physical hand, yeah. I was just going to add that, with the COVID-19, given all the situation with our businesses, I just want to urge to please support local businesses, local retail here. Thank you.
Amen to that. Gosh, why I have such a hard time finding the agenda. I think the next thing on the agenda is the XCAP. Is that the right? Is somebody looking at the agenda and can help me with that?
Yes. It's the
Grade
online
crossing.
matters of grades up. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a brief report on that from the city staff?
Yes. I have a very brief update I received from staff, so I'm just going to share that. And yeah, so sorry. The XCAP continues to work on their final report to the city council, and they expect to finish their report in January and have an update to the city council in February. That's the current estimate. And at their at your last meeting, we mentioned that the VTA 10-year outlook did not involve funding for grade separations. And I shared the letter with all of you afterwards. That was the city's letter to VTA, and many of the other cities neighboring also shared letters to VTA. And so as a result, VTA is drafting a process with assistance from the 15 cities to determine the region's priority. So there should be ongoing discussion on the 10-year outlook, and I'm sure there'll be more updates forthcoming on that, but that's where it is right now. And then also at your next meeting in February, there should probably be more of an update as the XCAP's work will be wrapped up or planned to be wrapped up and sent to the city council. So there should be more information forthcoming on that.
Thank
That's
you.
a brief update.
Thank you. Councilmember Tanaka.
Just want to mention that I have a 10 a.m. meeting, so I'll have to leave in about 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Austin, I know there have been some communication efforts coming out of the district regarding this. I believe our PTAs, or I believe our PTA council, either a subcommittee or the body as a whole, sent a communication to the city regarding their perspectives on it. Did that hit your radar, Chantal?
I believe staff received it, but I can follow up. I know that the City School Traffic Liaison Committee will be discussing it, I believe, at their meeting today. So
Okay.
I'm guessing that that's linked as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Austin, did you or the district send any communication to the city regarding this?
Yes, I sent a letter to the city manager.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, just reiterating the point that I've, flogged heavily in the past, I do think it's been a difficult process for the school community to engage in, given the circumstances of the pandemic and distance learning and everything else. And the election now seems like a distant memory, but that took up a fair amount of mind share during the summer and fall as well. And so I think we are, I continue to believe that the school community as a whole has not been able to give this the attention that they eventually will give it. And therefore, you need to be mindful that a big stakeholder has not weighed in as fully as they eventually will want to weigh in, and that may impact how things go when you try to make decisions. And I know that drives us crazy on the school side when it happens to us. So I can imagine it drives you equally crazy. And I don't know what to, I don't know if anything could have been done differently here. The circumstances were very difficult to have the kind of engagement that I think we all would have liked. But I do want to emphasize, talking to people in the school community who are taking a look at this, that I think they have things that they want to say. They have things that they're not sure have been taken into account. And I think they will, if we ever get to decision points, they will weigh in. So just heads up on that.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll definitely report that back to the staff working on this. And I think the engagement continues. The opportunity, once it gets to the city council, is another huge opportunity for everyone in the community to continue in the dialogue that's been taking place over the past few years. So just wanted to make sure it was clear that this isn't the end of process.
Thank you, much appreciated. And I should emphasize, I don't want that to come off as that you guys should have done something differently, or you were derelict in reaching out to our community, or didn't offer the opportunities. You did. I know you did. And it's just that we were not in a position to respond to it. Sometimes circumstances just don't allow. And that's just the reality of the situation that we're in. So I want to make clear that didn't reflect that the SCAP or staff or anybody, no one's trying to pull a fast one here. This has been a very public and transparent process. We just haven't been able to have our stakeholders participate the way I think that reflects their ultimate interest in the outcome of the project. So, okay, any public comment on this? I'll beat the city clerk to it this time. If there is, please raise your hand. Not seeing any. Okay, so thank you for that discussion. I think the only other item on our agenda is future agenda items. And I know we have, I forget what the name of that.
Alcove.
Alcove, thank you. The new Alcove is going to come up. And again, we're not going to have a meeting in January because generally the city does not get its members appointed by that time. I also expect that Ms. DeBrienza, at least I think I'll go off, and Ms. DeBrienza, I don't know if you'll be on or not.
It seems like we've fallen into a routine of kind of two people in one shift and the other one. So I assume I am returning. I will request to return, but we will see what President Durop does.
Yeah, though I think this is likely. I've been on, I think, maybe 3 years now. So this may be my last city school meeting for a while. So with that, I think we are done for this meeting and done for the year. Thank you everyone for all the contributions and efforts that have been made over this year to keep this organization, keep this committee functioning and kind of moving forward. I personally really appreciate it. I know the community values it as well. All right.
With that,
happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thanks.
Everyone.
And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.